Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're doing something that is honestly incredibly vital. We are taking the invisible, often entirely deniable reality of emotional abuse, and we're transforming it into concrete physical maps. We're going to dig into exactly what happened to your physical space over the years, but more importantly, we are going to map out how to truly, genuinely heal from it. So if you have ever felt like your own reality was being contested, this explainer is going to show you how your own house and your own body have actually been keeping the most honest records of all.
Picture this for a second. Have you ever pulled into your driveway, turned off the engine, and just sat there? Maybe you're pretending to check your phone, or you're just finishing up a song on the radio. Let's start right there at the perimeter. This is what we call the driveway airlock. It's that moment where you're sitting there, checking your equipment and taking your last unregulated breath. It's exactly like a deep-sea diver right before they plunge into the water. You might literally be 15 feet from your own front door, but your body is physically preparing for a shift. All right, Section 1, your house as witness. Let's look at exactly where your shoulders drop. You know, we often think of emotional dynamics as just this invisible psychological weather system, right? But the truth is, your house quietly becomes the actual shape of what is happening inside it. And without you even realizing it, your body draws a map of the house entirely without your permission. Think about it. You unconsciously navigate the kitchen like it's a literal low-pressure zone where storm fronts form. You basically become this highly sensitive acoustic instrument tuned to the environment, automatically adjusting your posture based purely on the specific pitch of a sigh, or, I don't know, the mood of closing drawers. You're decoding the threat level before you even have a conscious thought. The outside world becomes your rest state, and your own home becomes the shift you have to work.
And if you track the flow of a couple's belongings over a decade, it brilliantly illustrates this territorial transformation. You'll almost always see things moving in one very specific direction. One person's belongings will retreat outward, push to the spare room, the loft, to the garage, and eventually, they're just gone. Meanwhile, the other person's belongings move inward and completely settle. Now, nobody explicitly banned your things, but over a 10-year period, your footprint is systematically pushed to the unheated thermal edges of the house. So the absolutely crucial point here is what this idea highlights. Retreating to the garage or the shed, it isn't just some cliché joke about needing a hobby. No, you're out there because it is literally the last room where your nervous system can finally be off duty. It's an embassy. It is the last remaining piece of sovereign territory for someone who has, quite literally, lost the rest of the map of their own home.
We also really need to look at the social transformation of the home. Seriously, when did the doorbell last ring for you? What usually happens in these dynamics is that this exhausting tariff system gets placed on hosting. There are the heavy sighs before a guest even arrives, the tense performance you have to put on during the visit, and then the emotional invoice you end up paying for days afterward. This invisible tariff system slowly but inevitably murders the doorbell. And without guests, well, there are no outside witnesses to recalibrate your reality. The house basically just becomes a sealed jar. Moving on to Section 2, reclaiming your space. It's time to talk about taking it back.
So, we are shifting gears here from simply reading the house as evidence to actively testing the structure of your reality. Here is your practical toolkit to start doing that. Step 1, claim a single chair or corner inside the thermal envelope of the house. That becomes your actual interior embassy. Step 2, take one loved object that's been banished to the garage or the loft and return it back into a shared, visible space. And Step 3, slowly introduce outside witnesses back into your reality. Now, you might want to start off-site first, maybe at a pub or a cafe, before moving them back to the driveway. What you're doing here is applying a test load to the structure of your relationship. And whatever response it draws, that is incredibly valuable data for your record.
Which brings us to Section 3, false signs of healing. Let's look at what isn't recovery.
This part is super important because genuine recovery from this kind of dynamic is highly counterintuitive, meaning a lot of things that look like healing are actually the exact opposite. You have to understand this fundamental truth. True healing is made of subtraction. It generates absolutely no signal. It's the quiet absence of those imaginary arguments you used to have in the shower. It's the absence of pre-drafting ordinary sentences in your head before you're brave enough to speak them out loud. And because we humans are just frankly terrible at noticing when something doesn't happen, you might live through weeks of measurable, real improvement and actually think you haven't made any progress at all.
I absolutely love this analogy because we really need to validate this reality. Early healing often feels substantially worse. It's vital you know this. You aren't failing.
Think about it. For years, you survived by becoming numb, right? You used a flat calm as a kind of emotional anesthetic. Well, when you actually start healing, that anesthetic wears off. Anger arrives, grief arrives, pins and needles hurt way worse than numbness, precisely because the nerve is finally back online. Sensation is returning to the limb.
And I really want to warn you about a huge false positive, something we call optimized compliance. You might think you're healing because the blow-ups are down and you're navigating the weather in the house with incredible skill. But you have to ask yourself, are you actually healing yourself, or have you just become a world-class expert at managing the cage? Better management is organized entirely around predicting their state. Genuine healing, on the other hand, is organized around rebuilding yourself, completely regardless of what their state does.
Please make sure to distinguish between these two states. It is so easy to mistake the false armor of feeling absolutely nothing for actual strength. But contemptuous armor is really just grayness wearing a warrior costume. It stops you from feeling joy and connection just as much as it stops the pain. True peace means you feel accurately. You feel anger where there is actual injustice, you feel grief where there is loss, and eventually the color properly returns to your life.
All right, let's wrap this up with Section 4, the quiet recovery, the true signs of mending.
Because your body was the very first to know the damage, it's going to be the first to show the repair. Notice these incredible, very real milestones. Maybe it's just an unconscious physical unclench in your jaw or your shoulders while they happen to be in the same room. Maybe it's an acoustic stand-down, where you hear footsteps on the stairs and it's just information, not a blaring alarm. Maybe the driveway airlock shortens from 5 minutes down to 2, until one day you just turn the car off and get straight out. And deep down in the stack is empathy pointing inward. It's finding this unforced compassion for your past self and realizing, you know what? You were doing your absolute best in a system that was quite literally designed to beat you. If you take only one practical tracking tool from this entire explainer today, please make it this timeline. Burn the checklist of perfection. Healing is absolutely not the absence of a relapse. Your single best metric for progress is simply watching your recovery time shrink. That downward spiral that used to hold you hostage for a whole month, now it only holds you for a week. A conflict that used to cost you 3 days of agonizing self-doubt, now it only costs an evening. A bad Sunday just becomes a bad Sunday, not a verdict on your entire year. You just find the door faster every single time.
All of this eventually culminates in what I like to call the ultimate quiet victory, the supermarket coffee moment. One day, you're going to be at the store and you'll just reach for the coffee that you like, not the default brand that keeps the peace at home, yours. And you'll suddenly realize you did it without a whole internal risk assessment. You didn't preload a justification. It was just an unpoliced desire clearing customs without a check. That right there, that is the exact moment you know your inner life is returning.
I want to leave you with a provocative thought to carry with you this week. The world is never going to hand you a certificate for these quiet milestones. Nobody applauds an argument that didn't happen, or a driveway that was crossed in one go. So you have to witness them yourself. Round up, give yourself the credit. As you go about your week, ask yourself, what does your supermarket coffee moment look like? Keep an eye out for it, because the evidence is there. You are healing, one quiet, invisible non-event at a time.